All right, Sarah, Tennessee Kitchen and Gardens or Tennessee Kitchen Gardens?
Tennessee Kitchen Gardens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in. I know this is like you guys is probably busy season.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
very seasonal, right?
Well, the season is getting longer and longer. The more that we educate people about how gardening works.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Let's just start there. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because I have no idea how gardening works.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people like grew up gardening with their grandparents maybe. And the Old Farmer's Almanac says that in Nashville, our last frost date is around April 15th each year.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't think about planting anything until about April 15th. Cucumbers, tomatoes, squash, zucchini, peppers. That's like what you grow, right?
Right.
And so on April 15th, the garden starts, and then right around October, when we get our first frost, the garden ends, and everything is put to bed for the rest of the year. But what we're trying to teach people, and really coaching people to be great gardeners, is that you can actually start like mid-February. You can start even before then.
With the same...
Different crops.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, so just like there are some crops that love heat, like tomatoes and peppers and okra, there are other crops that love cold weather.
Oh, really?
In fact, they taste better after a frost.
So what crops are those?
Yeah, so in late February, you're planting what we call the brassica crops. Those are cauliflower, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, radishes on the brassica family, arugula. There's lots of spinaches, and there's something called mosh, which is kind of more of a German spinach.
Yeah.
That thrive in cold weather, and they, after a quick snap of frost, they actually have like a sweeter flavor to them. And there's no bugs in the winter time. And so we do that. We plant first in February and get like this really big, that's like green season. So when you learn about eating seasonally, you learn that like February, March, April, and May is like salad season. Salad season is not, even though it's hot outside and we're craving like a nice romaine.
Fresh, like cool salad, yeah.
Yeah, it's not really salad season in the summertime because in Nashville it's just too hot and greens don't like hot weather.
Oh.
Yeah, but then we can start again with another salad season in October. And we have to water quite a bit because it's hot and dry in October.
So do you have to do that? So I would assume the watering levels in like the February, March, April is much different than the October.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes it a little bit easier too for the new gardener, because I would imagine myself forgetting to, look at this poor guy. Yeah. I can't keep one fern alive.
Yeah. Well, plants want to live. Like they really do.
They're resilient.
They really do. Like all we need to do is provide them the right environment. So we plant them at the right time. Mm-hmm. We give them the soil that they need, the water that they need, and sometimes nature does that for us.
Sometimes you have to supplement it. Mm-hmm. What's the Tennessee soil like? What do you guys have to do for different crops, for different things you want to grow? What should people be thinking about supplementing in their soil? Mm-hmm. Because I would imagine that's like number one problem. When you plant something into some clay, it's probably not going to do too well.
Right. Even something like mint, which is known to be very aggressive, can struggle in clay.
Okay.
So yeah, Tennessee soil is very clayey, clay-like. Mm-hmm. And so what's strange about clay is that it's actually full of nutrients, but the nutrients are tightly gripped in that clay, and so the roots of plants have a hard time getting those nutrients, except for the natives. Like our native grasses and our native goldenrods and but we're trying to grow cauliflower.
Right.
That's not native and it can't find the nutrients in clay. So what my company does is we build raised beds and we fill them with really good soil that's been designed and been cultivated and composted to be perfect for that cauliflower, that kale, that tomato. And so we build raised beds. They're usually 2 feet high, sometimes a little bit shorter if we're trying to create a design that has lots of height to it. And we're kind of getting rid of the problem of our clay soil.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into y'all's services then. So, customer finds you guys. Mm-hmm. What's the process like? I would imagine the customer goes, "I really want to get into growing my own food." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's the next step?
Yep. So they give us a call. We have a conversation about what kind of goals they have. Do they want something? Do they need to put a garden in their front yard because that's the only place where there's good sun, and they need something beautiful that the HOA is going to accept?
All right.
Or do they want to create a homestead where they want to feed their neighborhood with, crops, with produce? And so First we start off with the aesthetics, the experience. Maybe they just want like a simple garden bed because they have a 4-year-old who they really want to see they want that 4-year-old to know what it looks like to pull a carrot out of the ground or to pop a thing of peas off the plant. And so we kind of talk about aesthetics, production, experience, and we kind of figure out which one do you want the most. If you want all 3, like let's kind of figure out how do we make that happen for you. So that's just a goals conversation.
Okay.
From there, we usually schedule a consultation. So we do an on-site walk. So where we're trying to figure out, well, where is the sun in your yard? Is there a slope that that you might not even notice, but usually there's a slope for water drainage. Where is your water access? Speaking of water, so like, do we have an irrigation system, or do we need to connect to the hose system, or do you want to go ahead and just be in charge of watering yourself without having an irrigation system? And then we kind of look at like, where's your kitchen? Like, how can you have a pot of spaghetti boiling and sprint outside, snip some basil, and get back in time to like get those noodles off the stove?
Yeah.
And so, so we think a lot about like just how do we create a lifestyle for you around this kitchen garden. So that's the site walk. From there, we create a design. And so often we'll have like lots of inspo pictures, kind of, we have like our own little Pinterest board of all the stuff that we've done, the stuff that we can do. And
you're good. You can keep it there.
Okay. And then we do some CAD drawings, designs.
Oh, cool.
Like so that you can kind of envision the design like right there in your property.
Yeah.
So from there, we make some choices. Do we want design A or design B? We start thinking about materials. Like, do we want to have a like a gray gravel that matches your patio, or do you want to kind of have some contrast and try something darker? So then we make those design choices. Negotiate on how our proposal is going to work, and then we come in and we do the install. The install can go anywhere from a few hours to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Kind of depending on how extensive
the intricacies, what materials it is, all that stuff.
Yeah, we've done lots of times. We love centering our work around the kitchen garden, but we also will do pergolas and like little outdoor kitchens and sinks, and we've done fire pits and bocce ball courts that are all attached to the outdoor space.
So a little bit of hardscaping centered around what the garden would be.
Yeah. We love to be able to focus on the kitchen garden as like, how do we now make this something that's really part of your life?
Yeah. Livable, usable, and looks great.
Right. Work tables.
Yeah.
We've been really into outdoor sinks because it's so nice to be able to wash all the slugs off your.
Right.
It's inevitable there's going to be a couple of bugs in a head of lettuce, and so it's nice to be able to give it a couple of rinses before you take it into the kitchen.
Gotcha. Okay, nice. So install happens, then I would imagine there's a whole nother side of it. Like, okay, what do you want to grow?
Right.
And so let's talk through that process.
Yeah, so it's always funny. A lot of customers will say that they feel like they've just gotten their baby, and they're like, what do I do with this now?
That's the way I would feel. It's like, it looks great. Now what? Right.
So as soon as we finish the installation, we always offer a full planting. We have some clients who want to do it themselves, but lots of times, even if they're experienced gardeners, they want to use our method, at least at first.
Cool.
And it tends to be really fun because we plant with an intensive gardening method, so we don't like bare soil. Bare soil means that there are weeds that are going to grow there. Or it's going to be more watering that you have to do. If we can get plants to cover the soil and create little umbrellas to shade the soil everywhere, then we're blocking weeds, we're preventing
cool.
We're preventing a lot of evaporation. And so
it's efficient.
It's very efficient, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks great.
We're really packing the garden full. It's
instead of just a couple plants in this big giant garden bed, you've got just a mountain of healthy plants, healthy crops.
Yeah, we have herbs and flowers and crops and veggie crops all integrated in one bed. And sometimes in Nashville, we have there will be a bug that gets a squash crop. Every July, I lose my squash crop to something called a squash vine borer, and it can be devastating if all you have is a crop of squash. But we're doing squash and peppers and tomatillos, and so if I lose the squash, I just put another seed in. So all that said, we do an intensive gardening process as we get started, and then we offer coaching and maintenance services.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, so where we're at in the process now is everything's built. It looks great. We've got the initial seeds in. Now it's growing, and now I'm like, oh, shoot, I don't want to mess this up.
Right. So then we come back. We have various services. Some people we see every 2 weeks, and they have big gardens, or they just really they're in a place where they want to get their harvest constantly, and they can't keep up with it. So we have some people we see every 2 weeks. We have some people that we see every month, and even then, those services vary. So we have some clients who maybe are taking off to on vacation for the month of July and maybe August included. So we'll go several times to keep the garden healthy. We spray organic organic pest control.
Yeah.
We make sure that like the plants that are not looking good get pulled, and we go ahead and put some new ones in.
That is such a useful service, man.
Yeah.
Dude, I planted some, like, I'm not good at keeping plants alive.
Right.
I need your help. And Savannah's help, for that matter. I planted like these bushes that should be resilient as hell. But at the beginning, you have to water them like 2 or 3 times a day. Went on vacation. I planted them at the wrong time because I had like vacation like a week later.
Okay.
And they were just all dead as soon as I got back.
Oh man.
What
kind of bushes were they?
It's like the most
basic
bush that should not die.
Okay.
Ever.
Well, a lot, because boxwoods, for instance, are pretty basic, but they are not easy
really?
to take care of.
Okay, so let's say it was boxwoods then. So it wasn't my fault.
No. There are a lot of blights that can get boxwoods.
Okay. All right. So that's cool. The maintenance aspect of that also gives what I imagine the customer would. It's like a peace of mind, right? You don't have to worry like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
You guys are coming in to ensure.
Right.
And then if you're not, then you guys can change their methods or habits or whatever.
And a lot of people love the coaching aspect. So some people, we schedule it specifically with the client. You know, if we have a client that has a 9 to 5 schedule, we will be there at 5:30, and we will work with them for 2 hours to talk about like why this, like what kind of bug is on this kale, and what kind of organic pest control can we use to deal with it. And then we send them the Amazon link to get it and make sure that they're covered with, for the next month that we're not there, so they can start to really feel like they have a green thumb.
Yeah, making it as easy as possible for them.
Right.
I would imagine, and this might be outside of your expertise, probably not, but what crops, if somebody has a small raised bed garden, what should they plant if they want to, like, for their health? What are the things that they should plant that they should be eating naturally out, like, no preservatives in it? If they want to start to get into that, what do you think are the most important things that
that's an interesting question. There's a lot of ways to answer that. First of all, I guess there's just this response around seasonal eating.
Okay.
Like, we need to learn, because we get everything from the grocery store, and we don't know that like spinach will not grow in Nashville, Tennessee in July at all.
So whatever you're eating in July, spinach-wise, is shipped from somewhere and preserved
I've actually read this past year. I read a really interesting book called "Eating on the Wild Side" by a woman named Jo Robinson, and it's not a new book. It's actually surprisingly, I think it was maybe in the 90s. But she talks about like the de-evolution of our food, and how like we now, a lot of food has been cultivated to taste sweeter and to be easier to pack. And so the original tomato was like a tiny little berry-shaped thing that had a lot of flavor, but it had like seeds in it. And now the tomatoes have been like cultivated to be big and juicy and but devoid of nutrients. And so if we go back to like the heirlooms and we eat right out of our garden, then as in like we chop it and it's on our plates 2 hours later. Then we are getting so many more nutrients than we would have if we got at the grocery store. Broccoli is an interesting example. Broccoli respires, it breathes, and so like as soon as it's cut, it is like not just breathing, but it's like panting out all of its nutrients. So it's literally losing nutrients to the air. And so if I decide that I want broccoli for dinner that night, I can go and cut it in the garden in the morning because it's a nice time to keep, it's nice and fresh. And or if it's in the middle of the winter, you can cut it whenever you want. But you're eating that broccoli and you were getting like triple the nutrients that you would have.
Okay, now I remember the first time we had a conversation, you told me that and it blew my mind. The other night I was cutting broccoli and I was like from the store and I was like, who told me
that little story?
Yeah, and I was like, why am I even eating this right now? Like,
right,
why am I torturing myself trying to eat healthy?
I mean, it's gonna be better than like a
like a burger or something.
A burger or a Ritz cracker, but
that's really. Are there any other crops that do something similar to that?
I think that the brassicas do that, but I think broccoli is like the walk away, like what I had, like the takeaway from that book was like that particular anecdote was like, what? But that's I think insane. Cauliflower and a lot of the crops that grow similarly are also respire like that. Yeah.
So that would be if you're gonna plant if you eat broccoli and you're interested in a garden, you should probably plant broccoli.
Yeah, and it's so cool to grow.
How does it? This is gonna sound so stupid. What does it look like?
No, that's a good question. We often talk like as we are planting the garden for the first time. We just did a big one yesterday. We often talk about like. First, we have a conversation about like let's walk around, like look at all the plants that we brought.
Yeah.
I want you to just notice what's here, and then notice what's not. So yesterday we had a 7-year-old, and he was like, okay, like he was reading the tags. He was practicing his reading skills. We have tomatoes, we have peppers, we have zinnias, and we have thyme and basil. And I was like, okay, well let's think about your vegetables. What do we not have? And so he was like, we don't have peaches, and we don't have broccoli. And we don't have spinach and things that he knows as a 7-year-old that constantly in his refrigerator.
Yeah.
No carrots. And we talked about why we didn't have any of those. Why not peaches? Well, they don't really grow in raised beds. We're gonna have to put a peach tree in. So we were talking about like how things grow, and then we talked about why not broccoli? Oh, because it's too hot for broccoli right now. Broccoli will come in the winter time. So we talked about like what was there and what was not, and then the conversation shifts a little bit, and we start talking about, well, let's look at this pepper plant. This is a pepper plant. It's not a pepper yet. Where is the pepper going to come in? And so we talk about like when it comes to plants, we either eat the leaves, the roots, or the fruits. And so for broccoli, it's a little bit actually confusing. This is a tricky example because broccoli, we do eat the leaves. You can eat the leaves, but that's not usually what you know of at the grocery store. But broccoli leaves, if you have the plant, it's worth eating the leaves too because it's the same.
Foam in a salad, right?
Yeah, it's basically a kale. I mean, I actually like to cook them. They're a little bit thicker than kale.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So with broccoli though, it's the flower that we eat, but before it actually opens up to flower. So we want to get it before it, like in the stage between like it's flowering, and we're going to cut it before it actually opens.
Oh, so the timing of that's super important. Then.
Yeah. Timing with broccoli is an interesting game.
Maybe I'm just an idiot and just take it for granted, but I did not know that.
Yeah, it is tricky. It's a weird. I
don't know if unless somebody's grown their own broccoli, like why would.
Yeah.
Is that a common thing to know?
No. I mean, that's like gardening 3.0 right there.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. All right. Because I'm like, this seems like maybe this 7-year-old would have known this, and I don't.
Oh no. I mean, it looks like a flower, like a little tree. We always call them little trees. Yeah. But yeah. It's basically the beginning of a flower.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So many questions. So let's talk about how you got into this, and like I always like to have that conversation with business owners, just because, like we were saying earlier, it's such a cool conversation to see where people's journeys have kind of taken them into not only like either their passion that turned into a business, or just they said, I'm sick of this corporate life and I want to run a business and I want to try to do this,
Yeah.
So what was the start?
Yeah. So gardening became a hobby for me, but it's an interesting hobby to take on. I was about 22. Well, so I'd grown up around gardening. My grandmother from South Alabama had a large garden in her backyard. So I remember her like skinny little butt in the air, like picking peas and stuff. And so that was in my history. Interestingly enough, my dad also worked for Monsanto, and so we had like a big community plot. And so I kind of knew, we talked a lot about like Roundup, and like at the time I didn't know how bad it was, and And so anyway, I was around agriculture, kind of. I like a suburban pool kid, like always playing golf and tennis and swim practice. And it happened to be kind of when we'd go to my grandmother's house in Alabama, it was a different life for a little bit. But then when I was 22, I went to Guatemala. I lived in this rural village, very, very poor. And there were people that were starving and malnourished children all around me. And I didn't understand it, and I went straight into like 22-year-old problem solver.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, they grew corn and beans for the most part, and that's all I really saw. And I didn't understand, like, why not tomatoes? Why are there no tomatoes in their backyards? Yeah. Why not beets and carrots and green beans and cucumbers and all these things that could save these little malnourished kids.
Right.
And so
and were they growing them in like a garden bed, or did they just have crop fields they were growing them in?
They had crops, and it was an interesting situation because it was this bizarre kind of Hatfield and McCoy situation, because over time this little village, every time that there's a family with 4, 6 kids, the land gets divided. And so they were really struggling with having enough land to grow a real crop of corn.
They just kept eating their cropland.
Right. So they didn't, they had like a little hut on their cropland, and that was covered in corn and beans. And that was how they made their money, to take those corn and beans to market. And there was really not much space to have tomatoes and cucumbers and such. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to get myself some seeds. I bought a book. I think I got some of my brother's like Auburn University ag books that he had taken a class. Yeah. And I just stole all of his books off his shelf when I was home for the holidays, and just went crazy reading about gardening.
So before we get into that, why were you in Guatemala?
So I was working as a missionary.
Okay.
Yeah. I was really just kind of looked into Peace Corps and looked into lots of different nonprofits, but met these missionaries that were kind of scatterbrained. They had like started projects, and then they would just like they'd like leave them incomplete. And so they had this huge yard around an old like a missionary apartment complex that had just never been touched. And they had, one of the missionaries' parents had a huge orange farm in Florida and had come in and built greenhouses. Greenhouses were full of these really cool worm casting farms. So they had basically built these compost heaps. And so there was so much stuff at my fingertips, and all I needed to do was do it.
Let's just do it, yeah.
Yeah. So
okay, so you went, you learned, you came back, and you're like, all right, I'm going to do it. What happens next?
Yeah. So, well, the next thing that happened was that my garden failed in a million ways. Yeah. It's like I woke up one night and went out there with my flashlight, which is something that many gardeners will start to do, because you just wonder what's happening to your plants at night. And there were these, what are now kind of famous. If you go to Costa Rica and you travel, you'll often see what's called leafcutter ants. And they are ants that you'll see like walking across a trail if you're out like doing like a zip lining course.
Yeah.
And they are carrying like an entire leaf above their head. It's like triple, way bigger than them.
Yeah.
And you'll see like, so I went out one night and I saw like my cucumber plant walking away. And I was like, what?
So it was a leafcutter ant just came up.
A leafcutter ant hill, like a colony, like took all my plants away. It was crazy.
They were like, thanks.
Yeah. So I mean, the villagers told me what to do. They said like, go put kerosene on the ant hill. Yeah. And like just burn it up.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, they obviously know what they're doing, the villagers. Mm-hmm. And I had come in just trying to be like, I got this. and I ended up learning a lot. And some things were super successful. Like I remember it was really easy to grow beets, but the villagers didn't really know what to do with them. But I think that beets ended up being a common crop because we got tons of seeds.
Oh, cool.
And then
you were growing in a flower, like a raised garden bed?
Oh no, I didn't have access to that kind of thing.
Okay, so you're going straight into the natural soil.
Mm-hmm. And it's different in Guatemala. It's actually really fertile soil.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
It's mountain soil. It's just black. It's beautiful.
Nice.
So, but I failed in a lot of ways. Like, the weeds came right back in. The bugs took away a lot of my crops. I mean, so did the villagers took away a lot of my crops.
They were also like, thank you.
Yeah, and which I guess that was the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got really hooked on it, and I think that it also became a place of of kind of like mindfulness and therapy for me. It was stressful. Like we would get up in the middle of the night and have a villager that would need to go to the hospital and have a baby and was having some sort of complication. And so it was really stressful. So the garden became like my place of, relax, reprieve, a little bit of solace.
Your mind could be off of other things and focused on this one thing.
And that stuck. Because years later, I left the mission field. I went back to I did teach for America in Houston, Texas.
Cool.
And so I was teaching in inner city schools, teaching high school, and man, it was stressful.
Yeah.
And for the first couple of years in Houston, I didn't have a garden. I was living in little like garage apartments and didn't have a garden. But it was kind of still in me. And as soon as I moved to Nashville, it was the first place where I had a really good yard. So I remember I asked the owner of the house, can I do a raised bed in the backyard? He said, well, as long as you provide me with some beets.
You're
I was like, got it.
I've done that.
I've done beets. So, so that was where, I kind of like had been playing with it since I left Guatemala, but then I moved to Nashville 5 or 6 years later, and then my garden just like, that became my obsession.
Your thing.
Yeah. And I was still teaching inner city high school. So
Here in Nashville.
So when I bought my house, I always kind of joke around because I had a neighbor across the street that loved to garden too, and we were both teachers. And we would get home and we would kick off our high heels in the passenger seat of the car. So we had like a stack of high heels in the passenger seat of the car and just walk out barefoot in our little pencil skirts and just start like weeding and making sure, see if our seeds had sprouted and
doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So then you lose track of time completely. It's like 4 o'clock until nighttime out there in the garden. And at that point, I had started raised beds. I had figured out how to like get really good cedar. I knew that Nashville was not a great place to try to plant in the ground, except for some things. So I just went crazy. I ended up with blackberry patches and strawberry patches and rhubarb and all of these weird things that people taught me how to grow. Just tried everything. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So then the gardening business kind of took off when the pandemic hit. I was still teaching, and I got to a place where I was like, education just lost its spark for me because I was in a place where I was like, well, let's just give kids the opportunity to like do a project, do some sort of experiential education, start a garden, build a computer, build a car, do something out, because I was teaching high school. And so, when my bosses and the principal had said, well, we need to provide a worksheet, a packet of worksheets, I was like, no, this is not what education's supposed to be. And so I started to lean more on the garden, and of course we were all working from home. So I was, that what started off as a 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock, pursuit ended up going from it's like 8 o'clock a.m. till 10 o'clock p.m. And I'm out in the garden all the time.
You were probably learning so much during that time.
Oh yeah, that was those were the experiments where you like buy bugs from Amazon and like watch them release the ladybugs and watch them eat aphids, and I'm like filming the whole thing.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Just to learn.
Yeah, just to see. I'd read about it and I was like, well, I'm gonna try. I tried everything. I made kombucha. I made elderflower wine. Anything that I could harvest and turn it into something. I was all about it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that picked up. You obviously just got more addicted.
Right.
Where was the decision to go? All right, maybe I can turn this into something I make a living doing?
Yeah, I actually was inspired by a Facebook post by this woman named Nicole Burke, who started a company called Gardenary. And weirdly enough, during the pandemic, I kept on getting phone calls from friends, and they'd say like, "I'm standing here at Home Depot, and there's like 15 different types of tomatoes. What should I buy?" And I'd give them this little like lesson on tomatoes. And so several of them said, I wonder if you could do this as like for a living. You light up when I ask you about tomatoes. And I was like, yes, I love it. And so when I saw Nicole Burke's post about becoming a garden consultant, I was like, that's a thing?
You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So at first it was just going to people's gardens and, people who might have moved into a new house and they had been left with a couple of raised beds, and they're like, how do I do these things? And I would suggest, well, here's where you buy the best soil in town. Here's how you can mix it to make it even better. Here are a couple of tips to make this thrive.
Right.
So it started off with just giving advice, and then with the help of Nicole Burke's class, I learned about some designs. So I kind of she taught us several templates to do for garden designs, how to do raised beds with arches or panels, something vertical to get the plants off the ground, which of course is beautiful.
Right.
And then having a base of gravel pathways, so something to walk on rather than just having to deal with like grass and mud at your feet.
Which also looks better.
Also looks better, almost like you're creating a patio with a garden on it. And so I learned about that, and I started to kind of take her designs and go with them. People started hearing about Tennessee kitchen gardens through her website, and so that was really where I got some of my first projects was through like a gardenery reference.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's the way you start a business.
Really?
I think so.
It worked.
It's the most organic way ever,
Okay,
right? In my mind, on the business side of things, it's like if you have people who are asking you, people want to pay you because you're good at your hobby, you're good at this thing.
Yeah.
You go, okay, I got something here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
From the business side of things.
Right.
Instead of forcing a product down somebody's throat that maybe they don't want.
Oh yeah.
You have somebody coming to you being like, hey, you're really good at this. Can you help me with this? And you hear that over and over and over again. You're like, okay, if I want to, this can be my thing.
Yeah.
This can be a business for me.
Oh,
that's so cool.
My dad thought I was crazy.
I'm sure.
Yeah, he just laughed his head off when
yeah.
And he's still kind of, because he's like, wow, I was wrong.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You're like, I told you.
Yeah.
How, what's the competition like?
Well, there are several other gardenery certified gardeners in town. But we actually work together. So I just hired one as my first full-time staff.
Oh, cool.
She is just like, she's been amazing.
Savior.
She is the yin to my yang.
Nice.
Like all of my visionary craziness, and she's like very detailed. Like she works from A to Z, and I work from like D and L and H and all of it.
I'm with you
all
there.
over the place. Yeah. And so she has really helped us streamline our products, and she creates a Friday newsletter, and it comes out every other Friday without fail. Like
Nice.
I would forget about that.
Yeah.
And so my first competition, I hired her, and I just love her. She's the
Nice.
greatest.
It's really cool. That's cool to hear. And that has been one of the, I think it probably comes up 80% of the times we have conversations with business owners is they have this number two that is just like everything to them in their business. Mm-hmm. And without them, you can just see when they talk about them, they're like, I don't know what I would do without this person.
Yeah.
Like they make everything.
Could not do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say like you're D to L. I think that's needed. That's like the visionary.
Right.
And then you need.
Yeah, you can't get too bogged down in the details.
Right.
Oh man, those details are important.
Yes, because that's why you need this person.
Yeah. And
you need this to get off the ground.
Yeah.
Right? To go, all right, we're 80% there. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then this person goes, I've got so much to figure out, but okay, fine.
Yeah.
And you're like, good.
Yeah.
That's
I feel like
partnership.
I had the idea of what value looked like for the clients, and she has been the implementation.
There you go.
Little things like this year we have, like I mentioned the newsletter, but one of the coolest things is that after we've planted a garden, we go in and we tag everything, because people are like, wait, what was that again? A tomato, basil, what's the difference? And so we have a tag for everything, but not only that, it's labeled, let's say onion, and then you can scan a barcode with your phone, and it will take you to our website where we have what's called our harvest guide.
Oh.
Yeah, so it has like pictures of the onion at different stages of its life, and then recipes. How do you dry it? How do you use
that
it?
is so cool.
Yeah. So that's been, and she's like knocked that out. So
that is awesome.
Yeah, pretty cool.
When you were saying like there's tags in it, I was like, oh, that'd be cool if there was. I thought that'd be cool if there was like some tech element to where you could scan that or something like that.
Yeah,
but y'all did it.
We did it. My big brother actually works for like a company that sells labeling. Brady, it's called Brady Corporation, and so he provided me with like little clear tape and the gun, like the little label maker.
Yeah.
So we're out there in the field after planting all day, and we're like typing out,
the barcode, making sure it all connects.
Make sure they all connect, and that we, if the client has like a Persian cucumber that they're really wanting, then we might have to make sure that we have the tag for a Persian cucumber.
That is, I usually ask about differentiators with companies. I don't have to, because I think that is huge.
Isn't that neat?
I mean, what you guys do is so cool. I mean, it's so needed. No one knows how to do any of this stuff. I mean, most people don't, right?
Yeah.
I grew up watching my grandparents had, a sizable field, right? They grew everything.
Yeah.
And we watched them do that, and I helped them do that. But I don't know anybody who carried. I didn't learn the knowledge from them, right? Neither did my parents, right? So we just don't. At least in my family, I don't have that.
Yeah.
So y'all's expertise and knowledge is huge.
Yeah.
But then you go from like, all right, I got all this stuff. I just picked it. Now what?
Yeah.
And you guys have solved that too.
Yeah.
With the scanning of the barcodes,
right.
gives you instructions on what to do next. Then, hey, this goes really well in this recipe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, because gardening really does become a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's, if you know that, like, I've got a huge tomato harvest, and I'm gonna have to put aside a couple of hours, and maybe even I'm gonna bring in my sister and my sister-in-law, and we're gonna do a morning of making tomato sauce.
Oh.
And so you kind of
So cool.
Yeah.
I've recently got into like homemade pasta.
Really?
Making like homemade pasta. Yeah,
Yum.
it's so fun.
Yeah.
But having
Let's do a party. Let's have like a
exactly.
sauce. And
you bring the tomatoes and we make some like homemade sauce.
Yeah.
Oh, with fresh tomatoes.
Yeah. And you can even just throw them in the freezer and make your sauce with frozen cherry tomatoes later.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So it's almost once you get a garden, it's also time for a big like trunk freezer. You need a second one.
That's a good thing to let customers know too. I think I would probably think, this is going great. I've got all this food. I'm never going to be able to eat it before it dies, right, or rots. Do you guys take into account like the size of what you're planting, the size of the family, what they can actually
We do,
eat?
yeah. And we also think about like for instance, we just built this garden that was 10 raised beds, and it's a family of 4. And so we actually, with some of the raised beds, we just put sweet potatoes in, because sweet potatoes take over an entire bed.
Oh, cool.
And then we also can put in things like perennials that are like asparagus. So the asparagus goes in. It produces asparagus in February after several years. It takes it a while to get established, but after a couple of years, we're going to have asparagus in February, and then you don't have to touch it the rest of the year. So we're not creating more work. We're really thinking through how, and little things like a blueberry plant is a perennial. Once you plant it and you amend the soil, it doesn't need constant love and attention. It's just a harvest.
People need to know this stuff.
Right? Yeah.
Especially how expensive groceries are.
Yeah, I know.
Like, if you have a perennial, which I'm an idiot, that means it comes back every year, right?
Exactly.
So if you have a perennial, then you do it once, as long as you take care of it.
Yeah.
You've got your blueberries
forever
for your shake or whatever you want to put them in.
Yeah. More and more every year.
I'm going to go broke talking to all these great businesses, because now all I want to do is you come out and create this massive garden, and then I have all this. I have no money, but I have all this food.
Yeah. What is it like? I guess we have to be garden rich and.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm garden rich,
poor.
cash poor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to let the potential customer know? What's some of the burning things that like every one of your customers ask you that you want to kind of spread there, that maybe we already hit it, or anything else you want to specifically touch on?
Well, I think that a lot of people really want to know, like, well, I really want to learn this stuff, and so I think we've touched on that.
Yep.
But just to reiterate, like, we definitely like play this role of like being in the maintenance space, where if you are in Italy for the month of July with your kids, then we can come in and take care of that garden.
Nice.
But if you want to schedule to be, we call it like shoulder to shoulder session, where we're all gloved up and we all have our trowels and we're all talking about like how to take care of these plants, and so that if you wanted to do it by yourself in the future, we absolutely want to. I'm a teacher and I want to like create independence.
Nice. You're taking the teach a man to fish, right?
Yeah.
The approach,
Yeah.
Well, I respect everything you're doing. I appreciate you being on our platform and hopefully, spreading some good gardens across Tennessee through the MyHome platform. And I respect the road to get here that you took.
Thanks.
I think it's so organic. I think it's, pun intended, I think it's the best, most genuine way a business can form. It doesn't, some people have ulterior motives. And if your route said, I loved this for years and years and years, and then people were asking me to help them do it, and I could also make a living in it, I think that customers really resonate with that because their guard is down, right? They don't feel like a salesperson's coming to their house trying to take advantage of them, which I think is super, super cool. So thank you for coming in.
Absolutely.
Sarah, it's so good to see you again. Appreciate it.
You too. Yeah.